Overall, I'd say this was probably my favorite episode so far this season. We had a tap out. We had probably the biggest game kill that we're going to see this week or this season. And it didn't only happen for one person, it happened for two, which I think makes things really interesting. But let's start with the tapo. Let's start with Igor. I don't think any of us are surprised to see him being the next to tap out because overall, I would just say things did not go his way this season. He struggled with the shelter. He struggled with his location when we saw that bonus scene. We even learned like he ended up picking a horrible spot to build his shelter. Couldn't get any fish, couldn't get any other source of protein. I think his protein for this season was one mussel. So he survives 20 days and the only meat he has is one mussel, and the rest of his calories pretty much all came from eating seaweed. The shelter, I don't know if it was his downfall, but it definitely accelerated the end, in my opinion. He was way too ambitious for his shelter and did not have the calories necessary to make it possible. I would have liked to have at least seen him finish that shelter, but really he probably wasn't even half done on day 20, and he'd been working at it pretty much since the start of the season, and that's pretty rough. Another maybe highlight for him was the brushing his teeth with the charcoal, and if your highlight for your time on Alone is one scene of you brushing your teeth with charcoal, I would say you did not excel and thrive while out in the wilderness. So Igor taps out. Interesting person, but things really, really, really did not go his way. Next up, let's jump over to our two beaver killers on tonight's episode. First off, Benji. We saw last week he shot the beaver, but lost track of it. The beaver got away. So he starts out this episode going out to search for that beaver. I really did not think he was going to be able to find it because usually if you think about an animal getting hurt, they are going to go and hide wherever they can. And seeing how that beaver got away from him, I assumed that it was going to be, hidden in the bush or made its way back to its den, but somehow he is able to find it and probably scores himself like 25, 30 pounds of meat. Gets it all cleaned, even sets up a nice little game camera for us with the beaver guts, which got that shot of the black bear. But I just kind of feel like if you're really gonna go after that black bear, what is the point of luring that black bear, a mile or half a mile, however far it is from where you are? If you really want to be hunting that bear, I think you almost maybe it's not allowed to bait for the bear, so maybe that's why he didn't do it. But you'd think that he would leave those guts somewhere that maybe there was a chance that he might be able to catch a bear while they were rooting around with them. So that's it for Benji. Let's jump over to Terry. There's two real storylines here this week for Terry. His bowel movements. So one story about pooping, and then one story about hunting beaver. So Terry hasn't pooped for almost 2 weeks, and it's starting to cause him issues. He's feeling lightheaded. He's having cramps, both stomach and muscle. And then he has his poop, and everything is cured. Terry gets his poop out and he's a new man. And he goes back to hunting beaver, which he had previously not been successful at. You know, the first time we saw him hunting the beaver, I thought at one point that he basically had the same shot that he ended up taking on the second day we saw him hunting beaver, and was pretty surprised to not see him at least take a shot on that first day. But he was waiting for that perfect shot to make sure that he killed that beaver, and the beaver was not going to be able to run away and hide. But even with that, and even with a fairly clean shot, that beaver ends up dying in the middle of the river, and Terry has to strip down and wade out into the river to grab the beaver. I don't think it was quite as dramatic as it was all built up to be. Yes, that water is cold, just a little bit above freezing, but he wasn't going in shoulder deep. He didn't have to submerge his upper half. He just got wet up to the waist. And when we see him come out of the river and just kind of casually walk back to his clothes, I think that gives you more of a perspective just how cold he got. There was no rush there. He just kind of made his way back. It's chilly, but I don't think there was real risk of hypothermia without him having to get completely submerged in the river. And I think that if the conditions were a little worse, he definitely would have probably started a fire before heading out to make sure that he would be able to warm himself up as soon as he got back. But anyways, Terry nails a beaver. Terry gets his poop out, and everything is looking real good for Terry. Next up, we have Timogen. He wasn't featured too much in tonight's episode, but was reasonably good for him. We saw him setting up some squirrel traps, which did not yield anything for him just yet. We saw him, slurping on his bunchberry soup, and learned that if you slurp your soup, then it's going to make you a little bit more gassy. I didn't know that, so Dr. Tan, thank you very much for bringing us a little more information and knowledge. Also, if you don't know, Dr. Tan, he has a YouTube channel. I believe it's called Survival Doctors. Kind of interesting, and always nice to see that what people from the show are doing and putting out there into the world. But beyond that, he sees a grouse, doesn't have his bow, but is able to go and grab his bow and track it down and nail it. So this would be, I believe, his first meat that he's had since being dropped off in Labrador, which is a good sign for Dr. Tan. Lastly, we have Tom. Tom is kind of building the shelter. Doesn't seem like he's too concerned on that front just yet. Looks like he's kind of using a dirt bank that he found and just going to build up a wall beside it and probably call that good enough for his shelter, which I don't think is a terrible idea at all. When you look at, say, what Igor did and how much energy he's had to put into that versus what Tom's doing, and maybe Tom's focusing a lot more on procuring food at this point than he is shelter. But, in my opinion, I think we can all see that Tom is doing reasonably well on the food front. We saw him this episode shoot a whiskey jack, and the first time we've even seen mention of them this season as being a potential food source. And we also see him catch a very nice trout, so he isn't out there starving just yet. So that's it for episode 4. Like I said, pretty good episode. The tap out, I really want to see us get down to, at least like 6 people, so that every episode we're checking in on every single contestant, because this start of the season is always a little bit of a struggle when we have guys like Timogen, Terry, and Tom, who I don't think we've seen for 2 weeks now, and then they're back tonight. So be more interesting once that number's cut down a little bit more. We need another 2 or 3 tap outs, and then I think we can really start digging into who is going to survive the longest in Labrador. So as always, everybody, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, we will see you later.